My name is Jean Melious, and I'm a professor of environmental studies at Western Washington University. I'm also a lawyer, and my background, I'm a partner at Nossaman LLP, which is a national law firm that's headquartered in California. And in Nossaman, I've been working in environmental impact assessment for about 25 years. An environmental impact statement is examination and a public information document about any significant environmental impacts of a project, and that word a project is really significant in this case. So in this case we're talking about a coal terminal. You can say, let's just look at that project site, let's look at Cherry Point in Whatcom County in Washington State, or you can say, let's look at how the coal is going to get there. The coal is coming from somewhere, how is it going to get there, and then where is the coal going to go? If you're the project proponent, you always want to make sure the project is defined as narrowly as possible, because that way the process will be shorter, it'll be less expensive, and there are fewer impacts to look at. We have two EIS processes going on with this particular project, and that is because we have a federal law, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. How many acronyms do you want in this interview? I can come up with, as many as you like. We also have a state process, which is the State Environmental Policy Act. They are similar. They're not exactly the same, but both of them have to be done before the federal and state agencies can grant their permit. The environmental impact statement is the responsibility of the lead agency. And in terms of the federal law, the lead agency is the agency that has the most authority over permit applications, in this case, the Army Corps of Engineers. So the State Environmental Policy Act, if there is a local government involved, that local government ordinarily is the lead agency. So that would be Whatcom County. Whatcom County has permit authority. Because Whatcom County is a small jurisdiction compared to the scope of this project, and there are going to be a lot of impacts. I don't think Whatcom County's done an EIS since the 1990s. The State Department of Ecology is going to be joining with Whatcom County. Those agencies, so the Army Corps of Engineers on the federal side and the State Department of Ecology and Whatcom County on the state side, are responsible for the document. They won't actually be doing most of the document, if any of the document. In terms of the actual work in writing, the initial draft will be done by consultants. There will be public hearings, and I don't know how many. Those public hearings, I know that there are people across the country from here to the Powder River Basin saying you should do a scoping hearing here because it's going to affect us. I'm assuming that the scoping hearings will all be in Washington State, likely mostly in Whatcom County. Anyone can comment. So if there are organizations across the country that are concerned, there's no reason that they can't comment. And certainly people who just live in the area can comment based on their concerns. One thing that during the scoping session people need to make sure that they do is aim their comments at environmental impacts. A lot of times on environmental impact statements, people will say, I oppose this project, I don't want it done. At this stage in the process, the agencies don't have to pay attention to those comments because that's not what they're analyzing. What they're analyzing are environmental impacts. So when people are commenting, the best thing they can do is to make sure that they're saying, I want you to review this environmental impact for this reason, as opposed to saying, I really hate this, turn it down. Both the state and the federal laws include health impacts in terms of what they want to be assessed, but it's not traditionally a key focus. So the words are in there, and the practice hasn't really developed to the point where it's very often, at least, a major focus, because the document is mostly looking at physical impacts, air, water, species, all the impacts on what we think of as the environment. Well, from my point of view, if I were in charge of everything, I would like to see the health impact assessment as part of the environmental impact assessment. I think it's appropriate. I think that it would be a good place for it because that is where we have a citizen focus and a process for providing citizens with information. If it's not in the environmental impact statement, I think it's entirely appropriate to do it outside. Mitigation is anything that will reduce an impact. So anything can be a mitigation measure if it reduces an impact. Remediation can be a mitigation measure because one potential impact of this project could be that you'll wind up with a large developed site with no use on it. If the coal terminal closes down, then what happens to Whatcom County? Well, one of the interesting impacts of this project, of course, is going to be its greenhouse gas emissions and how those are calculated, and how its impact on climate change is evaluated. And so mitigation for that, I think, is going to be a very interesting topic. And again, it relates to the scope of the project. Are we looking at greenhouse gas emissions, climate change impacts of transportation all the way along the route and on site, and the transportation of the coal to Asia, where it's supposed to be going, and what about the burning of the coal? And how are we going to assess those impacts and mitigate climate change? Climate change under both NEPA and SEPA is an impact that has required mitigation measures, and so I think it's going to be an impact that needs to be evaluated in this project. The question as to whether the coal terminal may not be permitted. And if that question relates to environmental impact assessment, there are two answers to that. One is that if the impacts are significant and can't be mitigated, it does provide agencies with the power to say no, to say we're not going to issue the permits, that we've decided that the significant impacts outweigh the benefits, and these permits aren't going to be issued. On the other hand, under both NEPA and SEPA, the federal and state laws, it is possible to get to the end of the process to say we have this significant impact, it can't be mitigated. Nonetheless, the process has done what it's supposed to. It's provided information, it's shown us what the impacts are, we've applied all feasible mitigation measures, we've gotten to the end, there's still significant impacts, we're still going to approve it. So it gives the agencies authority not to permit the project, but it doesn't require them not to permit the project. The lead agencies in the environmental impact assessment process aren't the only agencies that will be providing permits. There are a number of federal agencies that have to provide permits. The Coast Guard, because of activities in the waters. There are endangered and threatened species, which means that Fish and Wildlife Service and NOAA Fisheries would be involved. On the state level, there's a whole host of agencies that have to give permits. Department of Ecology, Department of Natural Resources is the leasing agent for the tidelands. They have a big role to play. Department of Fish and Wildlife. On the local level, really, it's just Whatcom County. So the city of Bellingham, which is next door, doesn't have any permit authority. The agencies decide on the scope, start drafting the environmental impact statement. I know they've been working on parts of it all along. And after that, there's another very important process for the public. A draft environmental impact statement is published, and that's circulated to the public, and that's a really important comment time. The obligation of the lead agencies after that is to take all of those comments and either change the environmental impact statement to reflect the information and the questions and the issues raised in the comments, or else to respond to the comments and explain why they don't really require any changes. And then the agency does that, and then it prepares the final document. If you were to ask me why this is a really interesting environmental impact statement, which I think it is, I think it's a very interesting situation that we're in. I think overall we're running up on the fact that globalization has really sped faster ahead than our institutions have. So we have projects that are global in scope. They're projects with physical impacts on the environment, identifiable physical impacts on the environment on a huge scale, because we have companies that have projects going from the Powder River Basin to Asia, and our conception of those projects and of our how we gather information for those projects, how we measure those projects, how we balance the benefits and burdens. Our institutions have not kept up with the capabilities of companies to do these global projects. And I think that's where we are on this environmental impact statement. We have a global project. We have organizations and institutions that aren't used to dealing with that. And I think we have a very strong tendency then to say, whoa, we can't go there. That's too big. We got to stop somewhere. We can't look at everything. But if we're doing everything, perhaps we need to start looking at everything. And that's why I think this is an interesting environmental impact statement.
Start up here. We need to have just a moment of silence while we record room noise. So, room noise. Okay, what the hell? That's as close to room noise as we're gonna get.